Hey gang, just wanted to give a quick look at the newest release that just came out, called this one Spritz. So this one's set to kind of mimic that look and style of those sprayed water images with the gelled lights in the background. So if you're looking for a volume-friendly way of doing this and a time saver, workflow efficient, this might be a great option for you to check out. So let's take a look here, just a rundown of the layer options in here, just so you can see what's available. And then we'll stick a subject in there and see how it looks. So again, starting at the top, for those that are regular users of my designs, it's going to feel very familiar. So we start at the top with some color grading layers. So we can see these are in a group here. There's 3 different layers. This is just meant to add some extra kind of contrast punch and color dynamics at the end. So that's why it's at the top of the layer stack. Again, those are layered, so they can be turned on or off. You can change the opacities of each of these if you wanted to tweak just how much was applied there, so feel free to play with those. All right, below that is our facial highlight boost, so I always include these layers to help brighten those facial highlights. Again, it's a portrait. We want the face to be the main point of interest in the image, so I like to brighten those highlights up a little bit. And they're simply just masked with black, so you're just going to paint over their face with white. And, as per usual, you're going to see those details in the layer names. And I see a typo in there already that I'll have to go and fix. So that's nice to find that now, but there we are. So that's easy enough to fix. All right, so let's keep going here. So we got our facial highlight boost. Below that, we've got a couple layers. You can see one is clipped to this group here. So this is our foreground flares. And then we have our color change clipped to this group. So basically, if we expand this out, you're going to see that there's some different options for flares in here. So I'll show you how those pair up in just a second, but they pair up with the different options for the background effects. Again, we'll take a look at that in just a second. Now, the color change is just a hue, saturation, lightness layer. So you can just push that hue slider around to make those flares, match the colors that you're going for very easily. All right, if we drop below that, we have a few layers clipped down to this group in red. So the groups in red are always where the subjects are going to be placed in my designs. So if we drop a subject in, which we'll do in just a minute, we've got some layers that are going to clip and affect the subject. And we'll take a look at how they get affected with that once we turn our subject on. All right, so let's keep looking and we'll come back to those. Now below that, we have a couple more, another group with another clipped layer, and these are our ground options. So if you turn these on, there are 5 different options in here. So we have a field turf type of look. We've got our court. We've got a dirt ground, some asphalt, and then ice, for that type of look as well. So let's turn our field on here. And then on top of that, clipped to this group, we have our color cast for our ground. So this you can make it all the same color cast, so it feels like everything's lit by those lights in the background. Or you can turn this off and go with, that natural ground color if that's the look that you want to go with. So again, if we turn these back on, like say our court is going to get more of that natural wooden type of color. But that's what that layer here is doing, is just creating that color cast on the ground itself. Now below that, we have our overall color cast for the background. So you can see what happens when we turn that off and on. And below that color cast are the different options for the looks built into this design. So we have 6 different options. So this is option number 1. You can expand these, and you can see like some of these brightness and streak flares and things like that are layered in here. So if you wanted to tweak those, you definitely could. But typically you're just going to turn these on a group at a time. So there's kind of option 1. And that's where you can see those flares are getting applied over that for option 1. So let's come up here and expand our flares. And we'll turn option 1 off, because now we're going to turn on option 2. So that's this overhead type of look. So we've got a flare set up for that as well. And again, we do this above the subject because we want that flare to overlap the subject just a little bit. Just going to give an indication that they're, blending into that composite a little bit more. So let's turn this 2 off, come back down. Option 3 looks like this. a little bit different flare style, a little bit different background effect style. Again, there's options for flares for 3 up here, which is going to be a broader type of flare. Number 4 is going to look like this, a little bit different again. Again, there's flares for number 4. Turn those off. And number 5, another style of flare, a little bit more sparse effect in the background. And again, there's flares for 5. And then you'll take notice, the only one there's not flares for is number 6, and that's because it's designed to be more in the background behind the subject. Okay, so 6 options means that you have plenty of chances to change this look up and get some variety and different use out of this. So I wanted to be sure there was plenty of options in there for that reason. So let's turn number 1 back on. I'm going to go ahead and turn the flares for number 1 back on. And let's go ahead and turn our subject on in here and take a look. So I'm going to expand a subject group. I've already got a subject dropped in here, so let's just turn this guy on. And let's place him. So now we can do this a couple different ways. So if we don't want to use the feet, many times I don't like to include the feet in there because it makes the workflow much faster. We could size, let's do Command or Control T. And we can transform our subject to be whatever size looks good. I think right in there looks pretty good. Now, if you ever want to center your subjects, if you're using software to automate this, you know, centering's not a problem. If you're doing this manually, you can always come up here to View and Guides and New Guide Layout. Just make sure your columns are set to 2, and it'll give you a center mark. And then you can just use the Move tool, or you can drag over. Let's center that football up and make sure your subject's nice and centered. Then just View and Guides, and we'll clear those guides. All right, so that's, if you're doing it manually, that's an easy way to make sure your subject's centered. And so you're going to see on these layers, let's turn the 3 of these off so we can see. First thing that's going to happen is we've got some darkening happening on the subject's legs. For this lighting style, typically what you're going to find in real life is that the lower part of the subject is going to go much darker than the upper part, which really helps build that drama of those background lights and things coming in there. So we got some darkening happening there in just the lower part of the legs. And mainly I did that so if you leave the ground off, you get that nice blend and transition into that black there. All right, so above that we have even more darkening, and this is going to start to affect much more of the lower body. And you can see as we turn that on how our attention starts to come back up here where it should be on our subject. And then we have a color cast built on here to our subject. So right now we'd want to set this to the environment color. So we could pick the jersey color or pick a background color, either way, to get one of those red tones from the background. And you can see how it's just creating that slight color cast over our subject, again, for compositing to help them feel like they kind of belong in this environment. And now you can see the opacity of this is only at 8%, so it's very low. So you could turn it off. You can even make it more distinct by bringing that color cast up even more, but I find keeping it nice and low just gives you a little bit of effect to make it feel like your subject belongs in there. All right, so that's what those layers clipped to the subject are about. And then you're going to see on those flares, if we turn those off and on, you can see how it just starts to overlap, like on this subject over his shoulders here. Which again, it just helps sell that believability of sandwiching your subject into the environment, that there's things happening in front of them. All right, so the other option that you can do is, let's say we wanted to leave our ground on and use him full length. So let's resize this guy. Let's bring him down where it'll make sense for his feet to be in here. So let's say something like this. All right, so you could also use this full length with the grounds turned on. And let's just run through shadowing. I know a lot of people, I think, overcomplicate shadowing a lot of times. I just try and do this very simply. I just come in and add a blank layer below the subject. I'm going to take my brush down to around 20 or so % on my flow. Black brush, first thing I'm going to do is make a little contact shadow. We're just right under the foot. I'm going to paint a nice little dark shadow like so. And then the next thing I do is another layer where I'm going to just with a few brush strokes softly paint some shadow underneath and in front, just kind of like that. All right, it's just enough to sell the idea that our subject's standing on something, that there's some shadow from them. All right, so it doesn't take a lot of overthinking to just make your subject feel like they're grounded in there a little bit. All right, so that's all I typically do for something like that. So you can see you can use it full length or cropped out, either way that you want to use this one to give you some flexibility there. So one last thing that I want to talk about is I did include in this download a custom Spritz brush. So now if you decide that you want to put a little bit of detail in front of your subject, that's what this brush is going to be for. So let me zoom in here nice and tight. So what I do is I would come up above the subject layers, which is going to be right here, and just add a blank layer. And we'll come over to our brushes. I've already got this brush loaded up at the bottom, so you're going to find that in your download. So we'll go to the Spritz brush, and now I would probably do this with like white or something to more of like a highlight color, and make sure my flow of my brush is at 100. And then you could just kind of paint. This is going to be set to randomize, so if just a few little brush strokes, it's going to put some indications of these little droplets starting to come in front of the subject as well. So if you want to do a little bit more of like an intricate type of look like that, you could bring the brush a little bit bigger if you wanted to vary the sizes of those little, just a couple dabs. So that brush is included in there in the event that you would like to add a little bit of that foreground detail. So if you want to further put the idea of that your subject is in the middle of this environment, there's that brush for you to add that little bit of a detail in there. All right, so there we go. I hope you find this super useful. Again, your color changes are all HSL based, so just moving sliders around to get the desire that you like. And again, you can use tools like hslpicker.com and stuff if you want to sample, a uniform color and then find those HSL values. So those tools are readily out there and available. But I hope you find this easy to use. Hope you find it wildly profitable, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.